One of the most proven, repeatedly, things in personality research is the connection between extroversion and subjective well-being, which is a fancy way of saying extroverts are happier. And in fact, there's one study that if you get introverts to act like extroverts, they're happier.
My guest today is Eric Barker. Now, if you try and look up information about Eric online, you're not going to find a whole lot, except for one thing. He writes a massively popular blog called Barking Up the Wrong Tree. And he has a book out now by the same name where he dives deep into the psychology of how we act in the world, often focusing on a lot of paradoxes, the weird things that we do, and bringing research to illuminate why we do how we do it, and trying to give us some good wisdom to how we live our lives. When I was prepping for this conversation, I was fascinated by the fact that I could barely find anything about Eric the man anywhere. So we spent some time kind of deconstructing who he was and what got him to the place where his deep fascination with human psychology grew a pretty giant global platform, which led to a book and some really interesting and unexpected stops along the way. Excited to share this conversation with you. I'm Jonathan Fields. This is Good Life Project. Good to be hanging out. I've been reading you for a long time now, which I'm sure you get a lot. So as I was sort of saying, okay, so let me learn a little bit more about Eric since we're going to be hanging out. You know, I feel like I know what you work on. I started doing a bit more research on you, the man, and I'm like, is he in witness protection or something? I got your LinkedIn page and it's like, okay, so there's not really anything here. And then I'm searching on the web and then I find like a bizarre question on Quora about like, who is Eric Barker, with two answers, only two answers. And one of them being that you're the dude who in 2009 graduated school and posted a Facebook ad to get a job.
Yeah, it was a crazy little experiment I had read about, and it was funny. It was one of like the first things I did with social media, where I was playing around with it because I realized, oh wow, you can do like ad targeting, and you could like this, and it was fun to play with. And frankly, that was probably like around like March of 2009, and then
which was
like one of months before I started the blog. I started the blog like literally 4 months later.
Yeah.
And
zooming the lens out, one of the worst moments in the history of the economy since the Great Depression.
Yeah.
And you're coming out of school.
Yeah. It was just, it's just like you're like, you can see the car headed towards the brick wall.
Yeah.
And, and so that was one of my first, and it got all this press coverage and stuff. And I was just like, wow. So, cause I didn't know anything about social media. And then I put the blog together that summer while unemployed. And then I kept doing it. And then Tyler Cowen of Marginal Revolution started really recommending my stuff, and it started accelerating, and that was really how it started. Those were my first forays.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, I want to take a bigger step back though, because you have this really interesting. It seems like you deep dive into topics and spend chunks of time. You're in LA right now. Yeah. Undergrad in philosophy.
Yeah.
What was that about?
It was funny because I like knee jerk picked it. And, when I was filling the form out, I was there with actually one of my professors and it's like, why'd you pick philosophy? And I just kind of, just knee jerk. I was like, well, if I don't understand that, I don't understand anything. And just kind of fundamental questions. And it's funny because ever since then, people will be like, wait, so you have an undergrad in philosophy, you have a degree in like entertainment production, and then you have another master's, and you have an MBA in marketing. It's like, how do those three line up? And I'm like, well, you've never read my blog, I guess, have you? And I mean, because that is what I think. I try to think about big questions. I try to make it entertaining, and you gotta get the word out. So it's funny. I've ended up in an odd way, sort of using all the education I've had.
Yeah, which also makes me really curious, like who you were as a kid. were you like the deep thinking, like entertainer? Because I mean, from the way that I've heard you describe yourself, and it kind of comes through in the depth of the way that you write. It doesn't seem like you were that kid. Well, it seems like you were probably very much in your head, but maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, no. I was very much in my head. I was a big reader, always been pretty introverted. And, I was just very much I don't think I've left my head. I think I'm still in there.
Yeah. Did you grow up in Southern California also?
No, I was born in Philly. I was raised in South Jersey, and then I went to college in Philly.
Ah, all right. So, Philosopher King as an undergrad, which seems to suit you well. Entertainment, though.
Yeah, after I graduated college, I spent a decade in Hollywood as a screenwriter, and I wrote for Disney. I wrote for Fox. I had a couple really bad movies produced, and it was a lot of fun. It was great, but it's like, really up and down, and kind of crazy, but then again, blogging is not much different, so maybe I can.
Yeah, but I'm curious. I mean, what kept you in it for that long? Because you spent a serious chunk of time doing it.
I mean, believe me, if I wouldn't have been able to like make a living or keep going, I definitely would have left. But it was like, I always managed to find the next thing, and and it was exciting. It was a fun industry to be involved in. But you're fighting, man. It's in features, it's all freelance, and and I love writing. I love being involved in creative projects, but basically you spend so much more time looking for work than working, and that's just not. And Hollywood's such a kind of closed ecosystem, like kind of they just do its own thing, whereas blogging and even writing books. It's much more flexible. You write what you want. People come to the site. Great. If they don't, okay, better change something. But you're not beholden to a handful of studios.
Yeah. It seems like it's much easier to sort of skip past the gatekeeper in the world that we live in than in the sort of big screen world. Although maybe that's changing to a certain extent. I mean, we're seeing, like indie films get crowdfunded and stuff like that. So
yeah. I mean, you're seeing, and now with, you're definitely seeing a proliferation of options because, there's stuff on YouTube, Netflix. There's more options than there have ever been.
Yeah. And it seems like a lot of the great writing is going to TV these days too.
No doubt. I mean, movies are what we used to call summer movies are now pretty much all movies. Yeah. And budgets have gotten, through the roof, and just to do it and trying to please a worldwide audience. And, it's that versus, the really good stuff is on television.
Yeah. And then you hear, what was I reading recently? I'm sure you saw this also. Something like Amazon has like a $6 billion like media production budget for the year or something like that. I mean,
Netflix, Amazon, and HBO now are just, and they're all looking at quality content.
Yeah. It's like they're doing the deep character studies and they're really interesting.
Well, the big Hollywood studios don't make those movies anymore. They're kind of almost happy to cede that territory. You take the Oscars, we'll take the capes.
Yeah, but on the big hand, on the what? On the one who needs coffee. On the other hand, it's like they're all going for like the formula that they really feel like is going to hit like the big thing out of the park. But it's also the thing that makes you. I mean, those movies cost a boatload of money to produce. So maybe you have a higher likelihood of it, like box officing well, but also if it doesn't, you're busted.
Well, I mean, it's kind of the venture capital model, where you expect 7 to fail, 2 to break even, and one to be this huge blockbuster hit. But, it's just the numbers are kind of staggering. But then again, now all of the major studios are owned by conglomerates. So it's not like,
everything's different.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like you look at, so many of the properties are big IPs where there's merchandising. The movie's basically an ad for something else you're really selling.
Yeah. No, it is interesting the way that whole thing has changed, especially if you're a writer, which you are, and like you care deeply. Yeah. About language, about story, about character. But it's interesting. So it's like, do you feel like that's the place where the writing side really bit you?
It's easy to mock screenwriting because we all see so many bad movies. Yeah. But the truth is that you learn a lot from screenwriting mostly because it's the one form of writing that takes place in real time. So you can have a 700-page book and the reader can easily pick it up and read 10 pages a night for forever versus a movie. You're probably going to watch it in one sitting, and it has to be written to be watched in one sitting. So you're very conscious of time, and there's a lot of white on that page. You don't have a lot to work with. So economy and keeping pacing becomes really important. So there's a lot of valuable skills that get developed in terms of studying screenwriting. it was interesting for me to go from screenwriting to then blogging, which is a different medium. And then I had to basically teach myself. This is my first book. I had to teach myself how do you write a book? I've never written a book before. So there were certain things that I could take from screenwriting, and I was like, oh, those muscles are really developed. And there are other things where I'm like, whoa, I've never done this before, and I need to pick this up. It was almost, I felt like an athlete switching sports.
Yeah. Where
you're conditioned, but there are certain skills that translate well and others that don't translate at all.
Yeah. And at the same time, I mean, because I'm assuming a lot of what you're working on was, it wasn't documentary style stuff. This was, like the fiction side of things. Which means that you really have to understand pacing and beats. And you have to understand how to keep people moving and keep people engaged like every 90 seconds. Like there has to be something dropped, which is interesting because then you get to take that into nonfiction writing.
Yeah.
Which is, I would imagine that's one of the things that was really able to help you distinguish yourself really is understanding the psychology of needing to keep people consistently moving deeper and deeper and deeper into what you're writing.
Absolutely. I mean, being able to grab attention, grab it early, to turn story, to utilize, to deliberately set expectations, knowing you're counting on reversing them. There's a lot of tools you learn there that you can implement in the nonfiction, but also in the book, I do tell stories. So that's some place where it's just like, for me at least, throwing the fish into the water. It's like, okay, that's, oh no, I gotta go back to talking about science studies again.
Man. Is there fiction in you? Is there like a novel or something in you, do you think?
I mean, it's interesting because I never really thought about it. That would be another thing where I'd kind of have to study it. I wouldn't know. It was one of the first criticisms that my editor had about the early draft of my book. She was like, it's really good. You got lots of information, but you have space. You can slow down because my pacing was so move.
Right.
And she's like, you can give it a paragraph or two. It's okay. But the screenwriting had taught me, it's like, a shot can't last longer than this many seconds. You got to keep it moving. Don't let them get bored. And I was like, all right, you can relax. And
yeah. So interesting, right? It also seems like it's, like you got really focused on paradox. Like what you just said before, this is funny. Like a bunch of years ago, I sat down with, Robert McKee, like the famous story guy, right?
Yeah.
And I remember a line, he's like, I'll butcher it, but he essentially told me, he's like, the story exists between expectation and reality.
Yeah.
Like that's where the story is. If you're constantly meeting expectation, there's no story.
No.
And therein also very often is like where the paradox exists. And which is, it seems like so much of your writing over, like 8 years on your blog and in this book, for sure.
Yeah.
It's all driven by paradox, like exploring paradox.
Oh, and I mean, that's how I structured the book, where each chapter I take one of the maxims of success and I look at both sides. I don't like when it's like, here's the one answer and it's always true and never wrong. And it's like, no, it's like there are two sides of this story and both sides kind of in their right context or at the right time do have advantages. There's reasons why, but we can kind of come to probably a pretty good answer or a pretty good approximation. But I almost treat it like a legal battle in a way between two sides. And I think that it's not this simple one size fits all, one skeleton key. So no, I think paradox is always intriguing.
Yeah, because so I have a past life as a lawyer.
Okay.
So it was interesting for me to both see there's a really interesting pattern that actually comes out of legal writing that you use in your blog post and your book.
Really?
Which is that, and this is funny because I was taught this my first year, like the classic 1L year in law school, right? And they teach you the shorthand is IRAC, which is issue, rule, application, conclusion. So identify the issue, like identify the rule or rules or a question, and then like application, argue both sides back and forth, and then conclude.
Yeah.
And that's fundamentally what you do in your blog. And it's also what you do in your book, but on a macro scale in your chapters, which is really interesting because it gives you this sort of full circle experience and then lets you zoom the lens out and say, okay, so like, how do I, like, what would I conclude? So it's almost like you kind of want to, you get to drop yourself into the end of it.
I'm going to be thinking about this for weeks now. You just kind of, no, this is what you're doing. Like, oh my God, you're right. Like that's, wow. That's fascinating. just gave me tremendous insight into what I've been doing. I don't.
Well, it's really interesting because it is like presenting sort of like a legal brief to a certain extent, or this is, and I remember this because I memorized that formula and I used that on everything that I did in law school, and it actually allowed me to do well. So like, all right, sweet. All right. So 2009, the country's disastrous. The economy is crumbling. You graduate school. You're looking for a job. And you do this really kind of fun, interesting, different thing on Facebook. That ends up not really panning out. And in the interim, like, or during this whole thing, you start blogging and asking all these big questions. What was your intention at that moment in blogging?
I mean, at first I was looking for kind of like interesting insights. I was combing through academic journals and I was just looking for what was really interesting, and what I started to find that really interested me was, questions we'd always kind of all asked ourselves about like life, about how things work, and, from all over the place in terms of, relationships, negotiation, happiness, whatever. And I started seeing that there's this great quote from William Gibson I love where he said, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And I started to see that where I'm like, no, like a lot of these things we wonder about have been answered in these like dusty academic journals. It's just not accessible to people. And I started looking, I'm going, oh my God, like either proving the kind of little, things we'd always suspected or disproving things. And that's what I really started kind of focusing on was just, I didn't want to write about or look at anything that you couldn't use. Where it's kind of like, oh, hey, here's something about your genetics. You can't change that. You're doomed. Versus looking at like things we could use to kind of leverage and just make our lives better.
Yeah. Was your intention more, I want to answer these questions personally, or was it, this is interesting for me, I wonder if it's interesting for others, and could I build something more substantial around it?
I mean, I wasn't even, at first I was just like, hey, I'm finding this stuff and why don't I put it out there? Maybe other people will find it interesting. And luckily they did. But at first I was just kind of like cutting and pasting like abstracts and then like writing a sentence. I wasn't even actually really writing. I was just like, here's an abstract and here's an English translation in one sentence.
And especially if you look at your earlier work, it's like there's a ton of excerpting.
I was doing like five a day.
Were you really?
I
didn't realize that.
I would just do like 5 abstracts a day, maybe a one line, or I'd highlight hey, this was the thing. And then eventually that evolved into like one post where I'd kind of cobble together a few things to show a trend or prove a point. And then eventually it turned into one a week, kind of more epic,
more topic driven.
And like, okay, here we're going to go down the rabbit hole on this one. And I would go back and comb through the posts I'd done. I'd read a couple books, on it. And I would try to just find some overarching idea that I could really explore within that. And then it became really challenging.
Yeah. Because also you start to develop at some point a massive body of stuff, of knowledge, of resources, of excerpts, of it's funny. There's interesting similarities between you and Maria Popova, like from Brain Pickings, in terms of, it goes at some point from curating and sharing to also your own work starts to become a part of this, your own voice, your own integration, your own synthesis. So it's not just, hey, here's something interesting I found. It's like you're starting to interpret and share and piece things together in a way where like that has additional value too.
And that was the craziest thing for me was that because I started out just kind of cutting and pasting these abstracts in like 2009, I didn't actually start like writing anything until like 2012. And what I realized was that like once I was kind of like, oh yeah, that's what I need to be doing, I was scared. And it was so great.
What was scary?
I don't know. I think it was just, and I'd spent, a decade, as a screenwriter. And then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, well now I need to, and it's like, I was like, oh geez, how am I going to approach this? And, cause it was this whole different thing and it was immediate, it's like screenwriting. It's like you write something, you sell it. It doesn't necessarily, it very rarely does it make the screen, but this, it's kind of like, it's going to be out there and like everybody's going to see it. And I realized I was scared and but I just kind of started small and and then more and more, I just kind of like started realizing like, where's the best place for me to let the work show? Where's the best place for me to use my voice? And that just kind of evolved, but it was
it's like exposure therapy.
Oh, exactly. I was not only talking about cognitive behavioral therapy, I was engaging in it at the same exact time.
It's like,
I was kind of
breathing deeply as I'm writing this.
We're going to put you in the same room as the snake. It's okay. He can't touch you. Reach towards the, it was exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, it's interesting also because right around that time, this was a time where a lot of sort of, popular writers were going deeply down the interpreting science rabbit hole and coming out with books. Yeah. Gladwell was, certainly started before that. But then like right around that time, a bunch of other people started sort of like doing similar work in book form, and they were taking hits for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which makes for a nervous environment when you don't come out of a background of hard science, but you're writing in some way trying to share that science with a popular audience.
Oh, I mean, I think I remember that whole debate, and I think to some degree, I think it's still going on, but it's kind of like, but I think the best researchers aren't necessarily the best popular writers, just like, the best football coaches aren't necessarily the best football players. I mean, they're different roles in a way. The people who, the news anchors are not necessarily the journalists who are actually doing the researching. And I think we like to blur those lines, but there is a distinction between, writing popular mainstream books and actually doing academic research. And so I don't know. I think it's worthy of discussion, but I think much ado was made of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really interesting. And I get what the hardcore science side is saying is that, to a certain extent, some of the work gets bastardized or dropped, or there are nuances that don't get passed through, or maybe I think, in some cases they've said people have completely misunderstood and misrepresented the work. Yeah. And I get that. Yeah. And at the same time, I think my sense is a lot of researchers do the work because they're wired to want to do the work. Yeah. They have a burning question. They want to answer it. That's what lights them up. And that's awesome because we all benefit from that, but we don't all benefit from that unless and until the wisdom of that work, transcends the walls of academia and moves into some level of popular impact. Yeah. Or else it's just, cognitive, it's personal inquiry, which is deeply satisfying for them. Mm-hmm. But, if they're discovering something which can have a profound impact on the human condition, to me, the question has always been, well, let's get it out there. And if you need to in some way, if not all of it gets out there, but if it gets out there, if the heartbeat of it gets out there in a way that allows people to interact with it and play with it and have it affect them in some way, I agree with you. I'm all for that. And I think it's worth potentially making some mistakes and having some missteps along the way in the name of creating that conduit.
No, I mean, look at other areas of science. I mean, like, medicine. I mean, not every drug helps every person, but a doctor will put it out there. We'll try it if it seems safe and certain. So, we need to be balanced about it. I mean, I understand why you don't want headlines that completely, like you said, bastardize the science, but it's like where I guess in general, where's the bigger danger in hiding this valuable information from people, or in putting it out there and maybe it gets distorted? I think that's kind of the question we might want to ask.
And also, in the academic world, in the science world, there's a ton of siloing that goes on. And I wonder sometimes when you have someone like you who's not focused in one specific area, but you're voraciously reading across a broad spectrum of sort of like areas of domain expertise, it creates the opportunity to say, well, this lab is working on this lab is working on this lab is working on this. Mm-hmm. And you can start to see patterns, cross-domain patterns that when you're very siloed, you're just not focused on the work of others. So or completely different fields that may in some way have stumbled upon the answer to your question.
To me, that's what's so fascinating. Even to take it to the extreme of like the stories I tell in the book, where it's like just finding those principles or those ideas illustrated in real life. Or like you said, to look in different industries, different areas, and you're just seeing these same things, these fractal like patterns in every different, arena, and to me, that's why that's why it's interesting for me to do interviews as well. When I interview, then I can put it in their voice. It's like, you want to talk about the nuance? You want to talk about the exact, statistical probability? Great. Go ahead. You can say it. I'll use your words as is. But to look for those trends and patterns, I think that's where it's really valuable, because then we can start to say, hey, maybe this is a broader idea and it's not just this isolated thing, and we can pull it out of that silo and say, is this something we need to look around for?
Yeah, no, I love that. There's so much value in that to me. Just get more people interacting with it. I mean, there's a lot of citizen science going on these days that is really fascinating to me, that, it's not peer reviewed, it's not double blind, it's not, it's not, publishable in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. Yet you're getting really interesting data from mass participation and sharing.
Oh, I mean, and it's like with the internet now, this stuff can be running 24/7 with absurdly large sample sizes.
Yeah.
I mean, so no, I think that provides an excellent first step for, yes, maybe later you do want to do the double blind. Maybe you do want to put all the controls in, but it's like initially that can help you look for the veins that are worth pursuing.
Nah, totally agree. So our awesome friends at FreshBooks make ridiculously easy cloud accounting software for freelancers and small business owners who know that making every single moment count is a really important part of getting a lot of stuff done and being able to do the things that they want to do in their business. By drastically simplifying things like invoicing, tracking expenses, and getting paid online, FreshBooks has totally changed the game for now more than 10 million people. You can link your FreshBooks account to your credit card and debit card, so next time you expense, the business stuff or the tank of gas or lunch, it just shows up automatically. They have notifications and awesome customer service. To claim your month-long unrestricted free trial with no credit card required, go to freshbooks.com/goodlife and enter the Good Life Project in the How Did You Hear About Us section. So 2012, you were working on the blog it started in 2009, right?
Yep.
Okay. You've been working on the book for 2 years.
Yeah, I got the deal, made the deal in January 2015. And it probably took about 2 years. But what was really valuable for me, it was really funny. It was valuable for me was, I'd been doing these interviews and I'd interviewed a lot of authors, and I would always kind of steal a little time aside to just ask them, hey, I'm writing a book. Do you have any advice? Have any thoughts? And I heard this one really scary statement.
Like, don't do it. It'll kill you. We want to know how you're doing what you're doing.
It was scary because I heard this one sentence over and over again. I talked to one really great, huge academic and author, and he said, well, I took the first year and I just read. And I was like, oh my God, I have to do nothing but read for a year. I'm like, well, maybe he's extreme. I talked to another professor at Harvard who's a published author. Well, I took the first year and I just read. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm a New York Times bestselling author. I took the first year and I'm like, oh my God, I have to take a year and just read. Like, when can I actually get started? And I'm terrified. I'm like, oh my God, I got to get an extension on my contract. What am I going to do? And then I realized I've been reading this research for, at that point, 6 years. And I looked, and when I started putting the book together, I realized, wow, if I hadn't been doing this blog for the book I wrote would have taken me 4 years. If I hadn't been looking at this for so long. And that was because it was a scary moment to have to think. But I'd already kind of been doing that work, and it was hard, but it paid off.
Yeah. Why a book? I mean, by all accounts, you were doing something you really enjoyed. Yeah. Your work was reaching a massive audience. So why a book?
I mean, I really do enjoy trying new things. Writing is kind of the thing I've always been focused on, and that seemed like the natural kind of next step for the blog, where everything had been growing. It had been just abstracts. Then it had been like compilation of abstracts. Then it had been me kind of really exploring issues. And I would get questions from readers that kind of presented this conundrum that I could never really solve, which would be, I would talk about a subject, and I'll revisit subjects like negotiation. I'll talk to a professor on negotiation. I'll talk to a hostage negotiator. I'll talk to this, and some readers will write to me and they'll say, "Oh, you cited that study before. Why aren't you showing me something new? I don't want to see that. I've seen that before. Why are you showing me that?" And I'd go, "Oh, okay, that's a good point." And then I get something from another, and then I wouldn't show that study again. And I get emails from a different reader. You're not citing that study. That's the most fundamental point. How can you not bring that up? You have to bring that up. It's key. It's critical. It's the most important research out there. And I'm like, because if I'm comprehensive, I'm going to repeat myself. And if I'm not comprehensive, then it's going to be looking like I'm negligent. And that's when I was kind of like, I want to do something that's not exhaustive by any means, but where, okay, I can really put it all out there. This is beginning to end, and I'm going to cover. And it felt like a book was a natural way to kind of do that.
Yeah, that makes sense, actually. It's sort of like pick a small number of topics, and then let's have a fuller conversation where we just put everything in there. And now if somebody says that to you, just be like, page 142.
Exactly.
It's all there. Go read it, man.
I'm not repeating anything. Right. I say it once. I said it once. I said it. It's done.
And then block them on Facebook. All right. So, and then I have to ask this one other question. So between 2012 and, so you get a book deal. Yeah. You got 4 years in the middle there. Yeah. Seems like you're blogging pretty much full time, assuming you're actually not in witness protection. How are you actually living?
No, I from 2010 to 2013, I was working in the video game industry, and I worked for Volition, which is a studio in Illinois, and then I worked for Irrational Games.
What were you doing for that?
I was doing marketing, actually. I was doing video game marketing. So it was after I got my MBA, and it was a big shift for me because.
All right, so now more is being revealed.
Well, it was
because the psychology of gaming plus marketing in that industry is really interesting.
Well, it was fascinating. It was also interesting for me personally because I was the embedded marketing guy at the studio. So it was so funny for me to go from a creative role in Hollywood to me being the suit in a creative place with all the creative guys. And I mean, I could speak their language, and that was why I had that role, was because I had an MBA, so I could talk to corporate. Right. And I had been, a creative in Hollywood for a decade, so I could kind of speak the language of the guys who worked there. And it was great. But there was a time, especially crunch on video games, when you're getting to the end, you got to meet that deadline, is just notorious as like a death march where just people are working insane hours to crush bugs and get the game out there. And, it can be horrible. But so there was a long time, cause we shipped like 3 or 4 games, and only those like 3 years that I was there. And there was a lot of times where I would wake up at like 6 a.m., like work on the blog for like 3 hours or so, go to work until like 7, 8 p.m. and then read, until I went to bed so that I would have something to blog about the next day. And I would do that like 6 days a week. And, for months, actually maybe for a couple of years. And that was pretty punishing, but I just always wanted to keep the blog going, but that was like my life. And, that was really hard. But then in, 2013, I started just focusing full time on the blog.
So when you leave there though, because there are no ads on the blog. No,
it was just, no. I mean, there's Amazon affiliate, but that's, so basically it was literally savings.
Right.
I just wanted to focus, full time on the blog, but I wasn't focused on monetizing, which, maybe my business school professors are shaking their heads right now, but, I don't know. For me, that's like it wasn't really what it was about, and but
by that time also, I would imagine you had a pretty decent sized readership.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly had a big readership. When was it? It was in, I think, August 2014 that my mailing list hit 100,000. So it was already pretty. So by end of 2013, it was pretty good. I don't know where it was, maybe like 60,000 or something.
Right.
But
it was showing itself. It was like there's a trajectory.
Oh, and it was growing at a very, very consistent rate. But no, it's like for me, I've just always, I mean, my site's not very pretty. It's not.
Well, that's the funny thing. I was on your site this morning before we were hanging out. And I'm like, there's such maniacal folk. Everybody's out there now, and like in the internet world, saying like everything's visual. It has to be beautifully designed and like that. Nobody will pay attention.
Yeah.
And like you said, your blog isn't hideous by any measure, but it's like very, very, very simple and streamlined. And then I clicked on your about page, and it's basically like a post from 2009, like circa like September or something like that that hasn't been updated.
No.
And I'm like, it's so interesting, right? But it is such a validation of the role of depth of wisdom and how that can still really sustain, and it still matters in a time where everyone it's all about visual, it's all about flash, and it's all about fast.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's just really about the content. Like in the end, it's about the content. If people like it, they'll like it. If they don't, they don't. And that's where I spend my time. And it's like, I get a lot of emails where it's like, if it's like, if you could please direct this to Eric or direct this to the head of marketing. And I'm like looking over my shoulder, like it's just me, hi, I'm all those things, it's really just me. And I don't know. I mean, so I don't code. I have a friend who's an IT guy who's kind enough to make sure that the site doesn't go down on a daily basis. But I just focus on the content, and that's why, I mean, there's not even a photo of me on the blog. There's no real bio. There's not, it's like,
well, like I said, if you look for details about you online, it's not the easiest thing to find.
No, it's not at all. And, I mean, maybe after the book promotion, that'll change. But yeah, I haven't spent enough time, I guess, talking about.
But it almost feels like it's actually so hard to find that it's a deliberate effort by you to say, this is not about me. This is about the ideas.
Well, I mean, in the end, that's what it's got to be. I mean, it's, if you like, I mean, it would be nice if people like me, I guess, but it's like, it's about the content and, maybe the style that it's presented in, but, it's like, I don't know. It's not really important who I am.
Which is actually kind of like an interesting segue maybe into some of the ideas that you share in the book. In terms of, so you shared that you're wired more on the introverted side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Which kind of like validates everything that you're saying here. It's like, hey, listen, I'm going to hide behind this thing and put the, my work out there.
Yeah.
And I want you to interact with the work and not so much me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, if you like what I'm doing, great. It's like there, that if you like what I find or what I talk about, great. But it's not really about me. I mean, I don't really talk about, I'll mention little things vaguely, maybe here and there about stuff, but it's like, I don't delve into like personal stories or whatever it's about. I'd much rather it be a connection for the reader with the material.
Yeah. So let's dive into some of the work, that you explore around introverts and extroverts.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting. And again, it's about paradox, it's not like, this is good, like introvert good, extrovert bad.
Yeah.
Take me into that conversation a bit.
I mean, it's really pretty amazing. I mean, the amount of research in terms of extroversion is, positives in terms of extroverts is enormous and gets a lot of publicity. I mean, extroverts, obviously, much better at networking, so it helps them get jobs. But one of the most proven repeatedly things in personality research is the connection between extroversion and subjective well-being, which is a fancy way of saying extroverts are happier. And in fact, there's one study that if you get introverts to act like extroverts, they're happier. And
has that been replicated?
I don't know. But if you tell introverts interact more with people, on average, they're going to get more value.
The extrovert role.
Yeah. And as somebody who's pretty introverted himself, that's a little sad to me. And I was kind of like, oh, geez, it's like, what's going on here? But what's interesting with introverts is what you see is that hallmark of expertise of introverts have all this time that they're not using socializing, that if they so choose, that the people, introverts are far more like, introversion is correlated with higher grades. Introversion is correlated with PhDs, with Phi Beta Kappa keys, with even athletes, athletes who, again, need to spend time on skill training. I think it was a disproportionate number, a vast disproportion. I think over 80% of, professional athletes considered themselves introverts. And so across the board. And there was also a study Also, extroversion is also correlated with, gambling, drugs, all these risky, exciting, but potentially dangerous things. And the other one that's a small coup for the introverts is, what was the fancy scientific jargon? It was, extroversion is, strongly correlated. It was inversely correlated with personal sufficiency. Or anyway, point being, the more extroverted somebody is, the worse they are at their job. Now, I'm sure there are exceptions, like maybe sales or something, but that your introverts are spending more time on the work. So it was really interesting to look at the different types.
I wonder, raising the introvert hand over here also. So I'm like, I so want to believe all of this.
Yeah.
I wonder, has a lot of that research been done in the last 5 years, or is there, because my curiosity around it is this, completely see how a more introverted sort of wiring can say, okay, let me just dive deep into the work. That's me. Like, that's you. Yeah. Like, and that will over time yield some really extraordinary outcomes, hopefully. Yeah. And at the same time, that also probably keeps a lot of us, connected digitally and in isolation for longer windows of time. So I wonder whether that also leads to two things. One is higher levels of feelings of isolation and risk for depression and anxiety. And also, like, I wonder if the evolution, if research that's similar, like if you sort of like take that over like the very, very, very recent future, I wonder if the opportunity for distraction that's presented to introverts who spend so much more time, like on machines and in isolation now, would actually diminish sort of the potential for like having that same level of like really going deep into subjects and creating super high quality work. Because I mean, you can get lost in games and all endless ways to be distracted online.
It's really interesting you say that, because I was on Scott Barry Kaufman's podcast, and he pointed to research.
Fascinating.
Yes, and he had actually done research that showed that it's like, obviously, introverts, if without spending as much time socializing, that time is available for something else. But he had said that they're not necessarily using that for skill acquisition, for whatever else. So to your point, especially today, where you have so many free, ubiquitous options for entertainment. Yeah. I mean, the introverts who want to use their superpower wisely, need to be choosing to work on something that is skill based or effective, as opposed to, just playing a new Grand Theft Auto. I mean, so that's just because that possibility is there doesn't mean they're going to use that time wisely. And that's what Scott was talking about it. So extroversion could be crowding out those hours, but it doesn't mean that the introverts are using those extra hours wisely.
Yeah. And I think the flip side also, I wonder if is true in that, whereas, you would have presumed that the introvert is a disadvantage because they're not spending all that time out there building their quote network.
Yeah.
And this is the idea behind content marketing, if they're creating extraordinary things and then, putting it out into the world through digital channels, then people have the opportunity to interact with, this is your story, right? People have the opportunity to interact with it. So you can, in theory, build an extraordinary network and an extraordinary body of work without having to actually, be the extrovert where, the network is connected to your ideas rather than you. So it's a different network.
Yeah.
But you still get to leverage it in the way that, 10 years ago, a raging extrovert would have been able to leverage their personal connections.
Yeah. And it's potentially infinitely scalable.
Yeah.
As opposed to how many hours in a day can you be shaking hands and maintain versus, a mailing list that goes into six figures,
Yeah. It's such an interesting time. It's like, I'm kind of excited to see where the next wave cause people have got to start to be looking at these questions, right?
We're going to start to hit, real limits where, mostly on attention, where it's just, people, no matter what else we do, people only have X number of hours in a day. And if it's the opportunity cost equation where if we're spending it here, we're not spending it there.
Yeah. So interesting. Which also kind of segues in nicely into, another topic that you explore, which I'll frame up as sort of the tension between grit and quit.
Yeah.
Like going deep into something that we've certainly, the popular media last probably 5, 6, 7 years, spurred largely by Angela Duckworth's work on grit. Yeah. It's been like the people who succeed, like they have this one singular quality. Yeah. Yet that is not the whole story.
No. I mean, the example I usually use is it's like if we were all grit, no quit, then, you'd still be playing t-ball and you would still be doing everything you did when you were 9 years old. I mean, we do quit things, we do. And sometimes we have to. So I think it's more of an issue of when, or what, and kind of deciding, and there are things that help us with grit, but there's also the issue of like Peter Sims has a great book, Little Bets, where to me, that is a strategy that's more focused on quitting. They try 10 things, taking again the venture capital model, taking 10 things and knowing that 7 things you try aren't going to work out. 2 of them might be okay, and 1 of them is going to be your next career. It's going to be your next big opportunity. It's going to be something awesome. But you're playing knowing that most things aren't going to work out. That is a quit based thing, not a grit based. And I think I understand that it's like absolutely enormous. People from sticking with it, people do very well. And it's something that can have consistent effort is something people struggle with. But I think we can't just say, grit's the answer to everything. It's like, no, I mean, if you were grit focused in the horse and buggy industry when the car was coming along, that wasn't a very wise decision. There are times where, especially when you look at careers these days, most people are having multiple careers. They're having many different jobs, many different roles. So in that arena, we need to be thinking options, not necessarily grit 24/7.
Yeah. And especially because, I think on 2 levels. In business, once something proves itself as viable. Yeah. And on a personal level, once something proves itself as this is something I care deeply about. Yeah. And this is a path that feels really good and that I want to deepen into. Yeah. Then I feel like that's a moment where, let's figure out how to cultivate grit, which is still a huge open question. And Angela Duckworth says this. She's like, grit matters, but I'm still not quite at the place where I can tell you exactly how to get it. Yeah. So it's like, okay, so there is that window where, once you have that thing and it is in some way validated by metrics that are meaningful, now let's go all in. Yeah. But to get to that thing, you've got to be open to dropping a whole bunch of stuff, to just running experiments and saying, let me go just far enough so I can figure out whether it's, it's giving me signals that say yes or no. Yeah. And then if it's not, I'm going to walk away. And I've seen as many people flame out because they refuse to walk away to something that was clearly showing itself as not what they thought it would be, and then ending up causing tremendous pain in their lives and in their careers. I
mean, no, we all have had a relationship.
Yeah, I'm raising my hand then. But
it's like we've all had a relationship where like I should have ended that 6 months earlier, or a job where why did I stick around? This wasn't going anywhere, and I know it. And where quitting is really good. I tell the story in there of Spencer Glendon who had a degenerative liver condition, and he had gotten sick to the point where he wanted to feel like he was accomplishing something. He wanted to do something. And his therapist told him, it's like, okay, we'll just focus on doing one thing a day. And it was a very valuable, and this is a guy who got a PhD in economics from Harvard. So, he was learning the most personal, version of opportunity cost. And that's something I kind of advocate in the book is saying, it's like, okay, if you could only accomplish one task a day, what would it be? And so Spencer was actually put in that situation. And some nights all he could do was make dinner. That was the one thing that he would accomplish. And to ask yourself that question, you can start to see, okay, well, what is the thing that I should be gritty at? And what are the things that I go that's really not important? Because grit and quit are not necessarily opposites. They're complementary. Because the more things you quit, the more room you have to apply grit to that thing that is important.
That actually matters. Yeah. No, so great. I mean, it's interesting too, because it all folds into sort of the bigger exploration of legacy too. And increasingly I look at legacy, not so much as like, what's the footprint I want to leave behind, but how can I have one good day? Yeah. And then tomorrow, and then tomorrow, and then tomorrow, and just like operate on the faith that if I do that, it'll add up to whatever the legacy it needs to be. Yeah. It'll be. Yeah. But that's not the lens that most of us have. I think because we all want to live forever.
Well, and I think our society kind of makes us feel like we don't like to talk about death.
Nah.
We really don't. You see a lot of cultures have, Day of the Dead, or they have something that's built into the culture. We like to act like that doesn't happen here.
Americans don't die.
No, we don't. Good consumers never die.
Right. It's all marketing.
Exactly. And I think that causes us some problems. I think, the fact that one of the few inevitable things, goes undiscussed.
Yeah, no, I do get a sense that there is an opening conversation to it, though. I don't know. Because you're tapped into so many sources. Am I making that up, or is that wishful thinking, or do you feel like in sort of your scanning and researching, it's bubbling up as sort of like exploring the idea of impermanence in any way, or not so much?
It's funny. That's the area that I'm not up on, like news and popular culture, and like I'm up on books and stuff. But that's books and research, but it's like I don't really follow the news, so it could be, and I wouldn't be aware. But I think there's a I don't think I think it makes people a little kind of cringe, and I think we're much more focused on keeping people alive than quality of life, especially in the medical industry.
Nah, I can't argue with that, actually. I remember doing some research a while back, and we were looking at like why are people so focused on legacy, and it was like the terror management theory. It's like they don't want to actually, they want to manage basically they want to become immortal.
Yeah.
And so I get it, but I do think there's tremendous value to saying, look, someday this is all going to end.
Yeah.
For me, for those around me. So what am I going to do today to make it as good as I can make it?
I absolutely think you're right. And I think in that also built into that is the issue of phases of life, where you realize that, you don't value the same things now that you did when you were a teenager. And 20, 30 years from now, you're not going to value to the same degree the things you do now.
Yeah.
And just realizing that, there's different phases of life, different times of life. And, when you're in that stage, things will look different, and to count on that. I think as opposed to we always think, oh, I made mistakes in the past, but today I'm doing everything right.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it's like we're gonna realize that we're making mistakes now, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
That's so interesting. The whole phases of life thing, I think, is fascinating too. I know. I think you've written about this also. How when you're younger, like you look at people sort of like in the later seasons of their life and feel like, well, now is the time where I've got everything, like I'm the happiest. But the research actually bears out the exact opposite, that it's actually like, the later season of life where people tend to report being much more satisfied and happy.
Absolutely. I mean, older people are happier. I mean, a big part of it is that a big part of it is not magic. It's not magic. It's basically, we will often be critical of older folks for being set in their ways. And we'll also be critical of youth for being so kind of fun focused and try new things and the thing is that when you try new things, it's fun when you find something that's cool, but you miss the target most of the time. You do things and it doesn't work out, or this isn't that fun, or this isn't. So you do occasionally hit the jackpot, but you also don't do so well versus older people spend a lot of time on this planet. They know what they enjoy. They do those things. They play the odds. And so they have a far better hit rate in terms of their happiness, because they know what they like to eat. They know where they like to go. They know what they like to wear, and they know what they like to do. And they do those things. And they're not running out to parties, meeting 10 new people, 5 of whom are lame, 2 are jerks, and 3 are okay. They're hanging out with the 3 people they absolutely know they get along with. And, and that keeps them very happy. And so no, in general, older people are much happier.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It all circles back to like your exploration of paradox. What's something that you're kind of salivating over these days?
I'm doing a lot of reading in terms of the dark triad, which is the 3 personality characteristics that are nefarious, are evil: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. And it's really interesting to just to see what they correlate with, what they don't correlate with. And so I've been doing a lot of reading in that area, kind of for fun.
Has nothing to do with the state of the world or planet these days.
No, this is far more personal. And so another area is I've been wanting to do this post for months, but I've been so busy with book stuff, is there's a post. I did an interview with a PhD researcher at MIT on the neuroscience of meditation. And so he's actually been doing, or been involved with brain imaging studies and basically looking at what happens in the brain when people meditate, what do experienced meditators' brains look like, and what are what is the neurosignature, or the kind of like profile of that? What does that most resemble, otherwise in people's brains? And basically, what comes out of that is that the neurosignature of meditation is actually the flow state. They look the same.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah. And so it's great stuff. And of course I've been way too ambitious about this. And basically, so I've been trying to read some of the like old Buddhist texts. I've been trying to read his studies. I've been trying to look at this and figure out how the default mode network gets switched off and all that. And I'm kind of being way too ambitious about it, but it's really been exciting.
Yeah. That's really neat, because if you do go into a lot of those old texts also, across different traditions, the state that they, describe, samadhi, enlightenment, bliss, would probably, like, if you deconstructed that, what does it feel like? Well, not feel so much, right? Because a flow state is a state that, like transcends feel. But if you, describe the qualities of it, I guess there's probably a tremendous amount of coherence there.
It was just fascinating to me. As soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, it makes perfect sense. It's like where you're not noticing the passage of time. You're fully engaged. It's like that sounds kind of like the ultimate goal of mindfulness.
Yeah, in theory, although I've been meditating for a lot of years and I haven't reached that stage yet. So I'm like, when's it going to come, man? Show me the white light.
Come on, I don't have all day.
It's like, just give me one day, like 1 day a year. That's it.
Exactly.
Just keep me in it, man. So it feels like a good place to come full circle with you. So as we said here, this is, the name of this is Good Life Project. And you're a guy who spent a lot of years researching all the different elements. So if I offer that phrase out to you, to live a good life, what comes up?
Wow, I wish I had more time to prepare. It's really interesting because I did a post recently where I was collecting a lot of like research and kind of like looking at some Buddhist texts and some Stoic texts. And one question that I said people should often ask themselves whenever they're clinging to something, sad about something, to ask themselves, it's like, do I have to have this to live a good life? And I would ask, I think that's a valuable question to ask whenever it's kind of like, oh, man, I got this, or just clinging, or I have to have this, or, oh, I'm so clever. And to just say, it's like, do I have to have that? Not maybe there's a bigger thing behind that. Like, but if it's love, does it have to be that person? If it's a job, does it have to be that job? Do I have to have this thing to live a good life? And I think it's very simple. So I don't know, for me to have a good life, I want to be fully engaged. I want to be learning. I want to be growing. And I want what I do to benefit other people. I don't know if that's the kind of answer, but that would probably be a quick summary.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
And as we wrap up, I want to give a final shout out to our awesome sponsors and supporters. Right now, you can post a job on ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, for free. Just go to ziprecruiter.com/good. Today's show is sponsored by FreshBooks, which is a super cool cloud accounting software. To claim your month-long unrestricted free trial with no credit card required, go to freshbooks.com/goodlife and enter the Good Life Project in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If the stories and ideas in any way moved you, I would so appreciate if you would take just a few extra seconds for two quick things. One, if it's touched you in some way, if there's some idea or moment in the story or in the conversation that you really feel like you would share with somebody else, that it would make a difference in somebody else's lives, take a moment and whatever app you're using, just share this episode with somebody who you think it'll make a difference for. Email it if that's the easiest thing, whatever is easiest for you. And then, of course, if you're compelled, subscribe so that you can stay a part of this continuing experience. My greatest hope with this podcast is not just to produce moments and share stories and ideas that impact one person listening, but to let it create a conversation, to let it serve as a catalyst for the elevation of all of us together collectively, because that's how we rise. When stories and ideas become conversations that lead to action, that's when real change happens. And I would love to invite you to participate on that level. Thank you so much, as always, for your intention, for your attention, for your heart. And I wish you only the best. I'm Jonathan Fields, signing off for Good Life Project.